building from the ground up and then acquiring to grow. There's a simple truth. Neither one is easy. They both come with risks. They both come with sacrifices. With a startup, you're chasing product market fit. You're building a business. You're raising capital. You're solving problems from ground zero pretty much. And you're really being misunderstood along the whole way. I would say for the first 7 years, everyone thought we were out of our minds. No one understood what entrepreneurship through acquisition was. No one understood what the micro market was. At the end of the day, it really just comes down to self-awareness in both paths. Am I passionate about this opportunity? Do I have the right skill set to take advantage of this opportunity? And can I ultimately make money? You need to sort of know when to walk away or try harder at certain things. Waking up every morning, am I still passionate about this opportunity? Do I still have the skills needed in order to lead and grow this opportunity? And last, are we making money? The answer is yes, yes, yes. Continue. Just listen to the things you don't want to hear and see where that conversation goes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you're still in charge of the direction you want to go, but just be open to listening to things that you may not want to hear.
Well, to begin with, thank you, Nunzio, for coming on our podcast. You have a really interesting experience having built and exited a business, as well as looking at businesses from an investor lens. So I'm really looking forward to understanding a little bit about your journey, what you're doing today, and anything else you'd like to share with our audience. Perhaps to begin with, we could start with the origin story of buyandsellabusiness.com. Could you share what sparked that idea? Did it come from personal frustration or market insight or anything like that?
Yeah, great question. A typical entrepreneurial story. So had a little business that I was running with a friend of mine back in university, and we got to the point where we were like, all right, we don't have the expertise or resources to really build out this business, to its full potential. So I said, okay, well, why don't we maybe look for someone that may want to acquire this business? It was a small business, but there was, it had a strong foundation. It was making money. There's partnerships. We had customers, et cetera. I said, there has to be some value to someone that doesn't want to go through that 0 to 1 stage and really just wants to, take it from 1 to 10, say. So I went on that journey and I was hit with a ton of barriers. A lot of real estate agents out the gate would say, listen, I don't sell businesses. I'd rather sell a house. Business brokers, this is 12 years ago now, business brokers would say, hey, listen, we don't touch anything, under $1 million, whatever the case was back then. It's just way too small, your business. And then, like I said, 10, 12 years ago, online, and the digital experience just wasn't there. All we had were things like, Kijiji or Craigslist or things like that. These online directories where, I didn't think it was appropriate to try and sell my little business here when someone above me was trying to sell a cat and someone below me was trying to sell a bike. I just said, that's just not, it's just, the experience just isn't there. So I did a deep dive, uncovered a bunch of trends that we're seeing sort of play out today. The popularity of just entrepreneurship through acquisition, or at least the second definition of entrepreneurship, which we call entrepreneurship through acquisition. So seeing, really sharing the fact that not everyone wants to start a business from scratch, but they want to be operators. And I think acquiring an existing business and taking it from there is a great path for many. So we already started seeing the popularity of entrepreneurship, people wanting to be, the next Mark Zuckerberg or whatnot. So people really wanting to own their own lives. And I said, that's great. So that was a great trend. And I started, thinking more out loud. Well, that second path could definitely be a great option for many that are still interested in that entrepreneurial world. The second was just the popularity of, foreign investors and immigrants coming to North America looking for an established business. And then the third most important that we're seeing, happen more and more today are the influx of baby boomers. The aging population that own terrific, local businesses. What does the world look like when they want to retire or exit? or what does the world look like when they don't have a succession plan or family members to lean on to take the business forward. So those were a lot of interesting trends that I came across and said, okay, let's do this. Let's build a platform that connects these buyers and sellers in the micro market. So businesses, under 5 million in enterprise value. The average out the gate when we started was 2 to 300,000. That average increased over time. But ultimately, when we sold the platform almost a year ago now, I believe the average at that point was up to about 700,000. So it came up quite a bit, but still very micro. And that's what we did. We focused on that for over a decade, connected over, I think, $4.5 billion worth of businesses. And we were really on this mission to inspire people, inspire people through entrepreneurship, through acquisition, letting them know that you don't need to start a business to own one, right? You could buy these great, profitable, established businesses that suit your lifestyle, or that suit your, what I like to call, personal niche, something that you're passionate about, something that you have skill set for, and lastly, something that you believe you can monetize, right?
Sounds like
Really,
ikigai.
yeah, right. Really connecting those dots for people. And it was great. It was a great experience, great platform, and really loved building it over the last 10 years.
Yeah, impressive story. Thanks for sharing some of that, and congratulations.
Thank you.
How did the acquisition by Village Wealth come about? What made that the right time and partner?
Funny story. So one of the founders of Village Wealth was actually a customer of ours. She used and leaned on our platform for many years. So we sort of knew each other already. And I think, the conversation really came out of a couple things. One is, I've always been a fan of Village Wealth and their vision, and where they're going and the direction they're going in our space. A hybrid of really creating a strong pipeline of quality deals for both brokers, but as well as sale by owners, entrepreneurs and operators that want to try and sell their business on their own. So I really loved their vision around that. And the second conversation was, we were just ready as a team, right? We've been building and scaling and clawing our way to growth for over 10 years, had a great time. But we all came to the realization that, sometimes the team that, builds isn't always the team that can scale. And so we thought it was a great time to get new energy, new blood, new ideas into the platform for the benefit of not only us as founders, but really for the benefit of our customers. They definitely deserved better, and we thought that, and we believe to this day that Village Wealth is a great steward for that.
Hmm. What do most founders, in your experience, founders or wannabe business owners, misunderstand about buying versus building a business?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think, for me, I think I definitely seen both paths. Building from the ground up, and then acquiring to grow. And I think there's a simple truth. Neither one is easy, right? They both come with risks. They both come with sacrifices, and there's a serious amount of hard work that's needed. But I think the main difference, or the key difference, is just the amount of risk, and the type of risk, and how comfortable you are, or that person is, in managing that risk, right? That's what it really comes down to, right? With a startup, you're chasing, product market fit, you're building a business, you're raising capital, you're solving problems from, ground zero pretty much, and you're really being misunderstood along the whole way, right? So risk is serious, but the freedom to create something totally new is amazing and
Hmm.
unmatched, right? For 10 years, we built buy and sell a business.com. And I kid you not, I would say for the first 7 years, Everyone thought we were out of our minds. No one understood what entrepreneurship through acquisition was. No one understood what the micro market was. You didn't have all these, micro private equity firms coming to the space. You didn't have all these, influencers per se, or coming to the space and pitching everyone on, how amazing and lucrative, the micro M&A space is. So just people back, people 10, 12 years ago just didn't understand that. They said, why would anyone want to, buy a small business? If they're for sale, it means they're doing horrible. Like they're a bad business. And, it's just not the truth. Like there's so many amazing businesses out there. So the whole startup stage is really, how long can you go being misunderstood, and can you just continue to attack each day with enthusiasm and build until the market kind of catches up with your vision ultimately, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of horsepower needed, a lot of endurance, for and risk needed for the startup route.
Mhm.
With acquisitions, you're stepping into an existing system, right? You have customers, there's cash flow. Yeah, there's chaos as well. And I think the challenge with buying an existing business is really just understanding, what's broken, what's scalable, and where the real opportunities lie. So the risk is more in assumptions than anything else, right? Getting under the hood, and potentially not liking what you find, but also seeing that as an opportunity for growth, right? For example, you come across an HVAC business that's doing things pen and paper. You've identified that risk or that challenge. You've made some assumptions, and now you're like, okay, well, I could purchase this at a discount because it's manual, and then I could slap some, a digital transformation strategy on this and unlock some more margins and create more value. So that's often the path, for buying an existing business.
Mhm.
But I think, at the end of the day, David, it really just comes down to self-awareness in both paths, right? That's the real differentiator, right?
Mhm.
It's as an entrepreneur operator, or leader, you need to know, what your skill set is. You need to understand your appetite for uncertainty and risk, and you have to ultimately understand what your long-term goal is, right? I tell people, when you're having a conversation, don't just ask, what's the ROI in this sort of, with this project or this or investment, etc. You really need to, ask yourself, what kind of risk am I willing to live with every day, and does it match, like I said before, my personal niche, right? Am I passionate about this opportunity? Do I have the right skill set to take advantage of this opportunity? And can I ultimately make money? And
Mhm.
and with this opportunity, all three of those things have to really exist in the same room, in order for it to be viable, and in order for it to be exciting, because one without the other won't accomplish much, right? You may have the right skills, and you may be passionate about something, but man, you don't know how to monetize the opportunity. Or you may know how to monetize the opportunity and have the right skills, but you're not passionate about it. So the endurance won't be there. You'll give up quick. So all
Mhm.
three really have to live in the same room, when looking at both paths, whether it's building from scratch or acquiring a business. So a lot of self awareness needed in both paths. But ultimately, it comes down to, yes, there's risks in both areas, different risks, and just be aware of who you are as an individual and what your long term goals are.
Mhm. And there's a lot that I think you can't really predict until you're in the game. You mentioned with the startup approach, people misunderstand you, and how people surrounding you at the time thought you were out of your mind. And as it turns out, you weren't. You saw something, and you had sufficient self awareness to follow through, or align yourself appropriately. We talked earlier about this kind of duality, or two things being true, how time can be both seem like it takes a long amount of time, and other times it's very sudden. And I think similarly, if you were to describe what a founder faces, on one hand, it could sound like someone who's delusional, like everyone around you is saying one thing and you're saying that's not true. Maybe you should listen to the crowd. And then every so often you see these success stories where someone didn't listen to the crowd, and it turns out that the crowd was maybe not delusional, but the founder was right. So how does that land for you now, being seeing it from both sides? Like, you mentioned self-awareness. I fully agree. That's a good North Star. But from the outside, are there any kind of hints that a founder might like if you were to advise someone, when would you advise them to trust their resilience and keep swimming upstream versus listen to the crowd? Maybe 6 million fans can't be wrong.
It's a tough question because if you actually look at it, most of the times the crowd's right, right? I always say the best entrepreneurs are oblivious to the consequences. So they're so focused with so much conviction in a world that doesn't exist, and they believe in that, and they're going to put in the work to grow it and get that vision, or turn that vision into reality. But I think at the end of the day, like, one thing that I learned even through my hockey experience was you need to sort of know when to walk away or try harder at certain things, right? Because one thing is, you could go down the wrong path for way too long, and it's not always a good scenario. You need to know when to switch, when to raise the flag in the air and sort of approach things differently. But for me, I've always woke up, and I'm leaning back on this personal niche topic because it's one thing that sits with me every day. Is you want to keep asking those three questions, and I think that should really guide entrepreneurs and their decision to stay in the game or move forward. And it's, waking up every morning. Am I still passionate about this opportunity? Right? Do I still have the skills, needed in order to lead and grow this opportunity? And last, are we making money? Right?
Mm.
If the answer is yes, 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 continue. If the answer is no, 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 then maybe it's wise to start thinking about, should I continue or walk away? And listen, there's peaks and valleys, right? There's cycles. There's a good time where some of those answers are hybrid. One says one is no, one is yes, one is yes, one is no, and it goes in and out. It fluctuates. And then if you're in that type of experience, it's really being committed to some sort of timeline, right? I'm going to give myself 3 years, and if this doesn't do X in 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
it's time to move on. So that's kind of how I look at this topic.
Yeah,
But
great.
yeah, you're right. The crowds are usually right. But I'll tell you one thing: the entrepreneurs that stick with it and continue to show up and are committed to some sort of framework that allows them to stick it out or walk away. When they hit something big, the crowd is very happy for them. So that's just the way the cookie crumbles in entrepreneurship. Unfortunately and fortunately. The other thing is too, David, is actually understanding that when you're working on something new as an entrepreneur, it does take time, right? The crowd is not going to understand. You're going to be misunderstood. And I think the way that works is, as you continue to push every day, and I think technology is really accelerating that timeline where you could experiment with new products, services, and businesses in a short amount of time. But when you start having different use cases daily or weekly or monthly, and other people see those use cases, that trust builds up as well, and that really pleases the crowds as well as the
Mm.
entrepreneur. So you could really get to a place where both happen.
Mm-hmm. What does a sellable small business actually look like, and how do operators build with exit in mind from day one?
That's a good question. So I think so one is, I think every single person, whether you're planning to sell your business one day or not, they need to build a sellable business because at the end of the day, involuntary exits do happen, right? There's a death, there's a sickness, whatever the case is. Sometimes involuntary exits do happen. So whether you're looking to sell one day or not, you should be building a sellable business. And for me, we try to simplify what this really looks like, right? And you could go deep, and there's so many, details and, how to create a valuable and sellable business, and the difference between a valuable and sellable business and how they're not the same thing. But I think it really, comes down to three pillars that we established over the last decade at buyandsellbusiness.com. The first is you want to make sure that one, timing is on your hand, right? You want to know when to sell and when not to sell. And that's based on social, economic, and tech trends, right? For example, if Blockbuster wanted to sell, it was probably a good time for them to sell maybe 5 years before this whole streaming technology was launched, right? So just really having your finger on the pulse and understanding where things set from a social, economic, and tech perspective. So
Mhm.
timing's huge. The second is you really want to focus on creating strong financials, organized financials, audited financials. Take it serious. Invest in making sure that your books are clean. And you want to make sure that your business model makes sense too, right? Obviously, there's premiums for more predictable revenue. So think about, can my business, support a subscription-based model, something like that, right? So really take, the business model and your financial health, right, seriously. And the last and most important is you want to build a self-sufficient business, right? That's the last pillar. And it's also known as a Switzerland structure. So you want to make sure when you're building a business, you have systems and processes and principles in place to make sure that that business can operate independently, right? It's not dependent on, one founder, one vendor, one customer, one worker. It could really operate independently, which is great because a lot of buyers put a premium on that because they know, okay, well, if I step into this business,
Hmm.
I know, won't won't
Buying a
happen.
business instead of a job.
Yeah, and there's limited leakage as well from a customer revenue perspective. Sometimes there's a lot of buyers that are scared where they're like, "Ooh, if I buy this business, I know like 20-30% of the customers are going to leave because they have, a very personal relationship with the founder." Right? So you want to avoid being in those positions. And yes, there's certain businesses that are prone to those sorts of environments. Like I grew up, my father was an accountant, and that was a very different environment where a lot of people. I remember I was a little kid sitting in the lobby, and people would come in and be like, "Hey, can I talk to Frank? Is Frank here?" "No, Frank's in a meeting, but so and so's here." "No, no, no, I need to talk to Frank." You want to try and avoid those sort of environments.
Understandable. You've helped save 16,000 businesses from closing. What is one story or insight from that journey that really stuck with you?
Oof. I would say it was oh my god. You're yeah. So that's yeah. So I think it's nice that you bring that up. I think selling buyandsellbusiness.com really validated our hard work and the value we definitely created in the market. Um, but I think most importantly, it really showed me the power of just creating platforms that enable others to thrive. Um, and and that's what buyandsellbusiness.com did. Yeah, you're right. I think we saved over 16,000 or 1,600 businesses, and we helped them avoid shutting down by connecting them with new operators. And I think that that saved around 10,000 or so jobs, and that's special. That hits for me. That's the whole point of building a business, to add value to the world. And I think one story that sticks out would have to be during COVID. There was an operator in the restaurant space that was getting hit severely. They didn't have the strategy or resources to really pull through. It was a pizzeria in a legacy pizzeria in a really tight community, and they were really scared. I forget the details, but they were in business for a long time. Like I want to say like over 40 years. And that was hurtful because I'm like, wow, look at all these amazing businesses that just don't have the strategy or resources to pull through like this really really tough, brutal situation. And I told them, I remember connecting and saying, hey, listen, you know right now we're running a campaign where we're not even going to charge you. We don't want your money. We just want to make sure that your business lives on, um, and we're going to get your listing on our site posted. And I believe within 2 or 3 weeks they were already having a conversation with a potential buyer. There was a connection, and they were having a conversation with a potential buyer. We made that connection, and I think the last time I checked, this would have been maybe 6 or 7 months ago. They're still in business, so um, that was super powerful. Yeah.
After your exit, what was it like shifting from founder operator to investor advisor?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so yeah, after selling the platform, um yeah, I faced this new challenge. Who am I if I'm not in the trenches every day, building and operating this platform that I've been building for the last decade. So I think that transition um was an identity shift in my opinion, right?
Mhm.
But I think what really helped me was 2, 3 years ago, I decided to launch something called Rothwell Capital. It's a very passive holding company, and it allows me to invest, advise, and mentor, kinds of businesses that and people that I believe in. Right? It's not a traditional firm or anything. It's more personal, and that's where I like to deploy capital, and engage in some meaningful opportunities and conversations, sort of like on my terms, when I want and if I want. And that mindset shift was really real, because for me it went from you know building it myself to helping others build it better. It went from, okay, let's go all in, sort of like deploying leverage in a very intelligent way, where it's like, no, we're not going to go all in, or I'm not going to go all in. And it also went from operating with a small team to collaborating with bigger teams or startups or businesses that just have a big more departments, more people, etc. So it was quite a transition. But I think the value I think right now my value really comes from not doing everything, which as an entrepreneur you're so used to, right? You're used to just doing everything and anything to get things done,
Hmm.
uh, and it's put me, from that sort of environment to spotting blind spots, opening doors for others, and really helping leaders make better decisions with speed. So that's how I've been navigating, sort of, from founder to advisor, sort of, and investor, so to speak. And it's nice. The amount of brilliant entrepreneurs and operators and leaders I talk to is mind blowing. Canada and the U.S. We're the best in the world for that, for sure.
What's your North Star when evaluating whether to say yes to a new project or opportunity?
I think, once again, not to be redundant, it's gonna go back to that personal niche sort of thing, right? Am I passionate about it? Do I have the skills to actually add value? And can I monetize the opportunity, not just for myself or for Rothwell, but also for the entrepreneur? That's really it.
Pivoting a little bit to your sports background, how did a professional athlete shape your mindset as a business leader? How did being a professional athlete shape your mindset?
Well, it is. Well, yeah, it's. Oh my God, it's my mindset. Like, my DNA. I'm a hockey player, right? Everything I know about discipline, preparation, my mindset, I learned from in that crease as a goalie. Um, you know, as a goalie, you're sort of like this last line of defense, right? So pressure is constant. Your job is to stay as calm as possible, anticipate the next play or the shot, and deliver and execute, right? Even during failure or challenging times, you always have to reflect when you're in the crease, and reset, forget, and play, and focus on the next play, sort of, or have this next play mentality, right? And that's how I address business too, to this date. It's it's the same way, right? I want to stay focused on my goals at hand. I want to stay focused when things get too loud. I want to anticipate and control what I can control, the controllables, and I want to show up consistently, even when it's hard, right? Even when the opponent is the best team in Canada, I'm not afraid. I'm going to show up and give it everything I got. That's the same approach I take in business. So I think for me, sports really gave me thick skin, right? Thick skin, this team first mindset, and this obsession with performance, right? That foundation has carried me through every entrepreneurial high and low for sure. So sports is in my DNA.
What unique strengths or challenges do Canadian entrepreneurs face right now?
Um, I've always said that I think Canada has so much talent, um, but we're not bold enough. We're not loud enough. We're very conservative, um, from top down, right? When we look at even our VCs in Canada, they approach investing in startups just like banks would. It's very risk adverse, and there's not enough bold bets on entrepreneurs in Canada. And I think that also makes Canadian entrepreneurs um, less ambitious, right? I think right now that's the biggest. I would say that's the biggest challenge right now in Canada. It's we need to think bigger. We need to be louder. We need to be more proud of how amazing the country is and how smart our people are, and the amazing work that can actually happen in this country. We've had really big businesses that have gone away, and I always scratch my head wondering why, right? And aside from the 10x population size in the U.S., it's still possible here, right? We have Shopify's, we have the Blackberries, we have these big businesses that can do great things. Okay, but let's try and do more of that. Sometimes my answer comes down to, we need to be more bold and we need to have more faith in our VC community, as well as our financial institutions. They have to have more faith in entrepreneurs, and they have to be willing to risk a little bit more. I think that conversation, keeps me up at night, right? The difference in risk capital in Canada versus, for example, the US. I think that's the biggest difference. In the US, the risk capital is significantly higher than Canada. And that sort of limits, the possibilities for a lot of entrepreneurs in Canada, unless they decide to pick up and move to the US, which unfortunately, a lot of startups and entrepreneurs do that.
You've pledged equity to charity through the Upside Foundation. Could you talk about what impact driven entrepreneurship means to you?
Well, I think it's everything, right? Entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs change the world, right? I think doing business just to make money is sort of boring. Like we have a responsibility to make this world better and add value to the world, and that's one personal initiative I had for myself, right? And it's a great foundation. Basically, once there's a liquidity event, I pledged X amount of equity to that foundation, and we'll be allocating it to a charity of my choice. We're actually in the conversations of working that all out and making sure that happens. But yeah, I think it's quite simple. We're here to add value and make people's lives better. So for me, it's sort of a no brainer.
On that point, what would you like your legacy to be personally or professionally?
A good father, a good husband, and someone that really just cared. Ultimately, I think that's, in my opinion, one of the biggest differentiators between people that you know do great work and people that don't. I think caring makes the difference. So I want to be remembered as someone just cared about getting things done, cared about adding value to the world, cared about relationships, cared about making people feel heard, cared about answering emails as quickly as possible or entertaining things as efficiently as possible. I just care. So I definitely want to be remembered as a great father, great husband, and someone that just really cared about every interaction I have in this life I have.
If you were to do anything differently starting buy and sell a business today, what would it be?
So I think one of the things is with buy and sell is we started super early, so timing was not on our hand, and we ultimately, like I said before, we're tired and looking for a new vision and new energy to come in. This is super hard, but I wish I delayed the launch of buy and sell by at least 4 or 5 years.
Interesting. You brought up some really excellent advice. Is there anything that is underappreciated in business that you would like to highlight for current or upcoming entrepreneurs, like an underrated lesson?
Yeah, that's another good question.
You mentioned self awareness, thick skin,
Yeah,
passion.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, no, I get it. I just want to give you a good answer. I think for me, it's listen to the things you don't want to hear, right? Lean into, and what that ultimately means is you got to lean into discomfort sometimes, right? Having those conversations you don't want to have ultimately lead to growth and lead to things that you sort of were, blindsided by. So I think that's one thing I would definitely tell entrepreneurs today. Listen to the things you don't want to hear. There's just so much noise and so many different opinions. Um, I think sometimes at the end of it, you need to take it all in with a grain of salt and listen to some sides that you may not agree with, or positions you don't agree with, or projects you don't agree with. Just listen to the things you don't want to hear and see where that conversation goes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you're still in charge of the direction you want to go, but just be open to listening to things that you may not want to hear.
hmm, good advice. Well, we covered a lot of ground. Really impressive career that you've had so far, and I know there's still a lot of runway left. But that's interesting. Starting with sports, and then starting as an owner, and then now being a mentor, advisor, helping others. Is there
Yeah,
anything that you want to mention as we wrap up?
yeah, I think so. It's my life and experience has been wild. From sports to entrepreneurship to advisor, and during the last year as well, I've been reflecting on what does my next chapter look like, and I think for me it's Rothwell Capital is a great launching playground in my opinion. It's this home base where I get to invest and support and collaborate with amazing and ambitious founders. But what's next and what's big for me is not really Rothwell per se. It's actually Pallet Connect. And that's something I'm all in right now. And the reason why I'm all in on that is because Pallet Connect is really playing at this intersection of everything I love: technology, logistics, supply chain, and really servicing an overlooked industry with such massive upside. And this Pallet Connect isn't just a software company. It's actually this ERP platform that's bringing clarity, AI, automation, and scale to an industry that's traditionally been manual, fragmented, and under-supported. So I'm really excited because I generally see what others don't. And through our conversation, you might have noticed that, right? Where I'm jumping in maybe too early on certain spaces, or sort of ignoring the consequences of certain things. But I'm excited because in this space, I'm sort of seeing what others don't see as well. It's a massive it's a massive market where the tech is definitely behind. The problem is real, right? You have inefficiencies, lost pallets, you have fragmented systems, and you have thousands and thousands of these pallet companies around the world really needing help. And the team at Pallet Connect is really solving it in the right way, right? There's deep industry insight. There's a modern platform that automates and optimizes and organizes everything for these pallet companies, from the back office to the production floor, all the way to logistics. So I think that's what really excites me next, right? Pallet Connect has the DNA of being a category definer, and I get to bring my operator mindset and my entrepreneurial mindset, and also my tech experience and my scaling playbook, um, to that environment and really help them scale and continue to add value to their customers. So, yeah, Pallet Connect is really firing me up right now. And it's not just about money; it's about the impact the company has. If you think about it, and the founder at Pallet Connect also said this to me, if you look at everything around you, at some point it's touched a pallet, and I think that's why I'm finding it incredibly fulfilling to support companies operating in this space. They play a crucial role in the backbone of our economy, and helping them grow means contributing to something much bigger than just myself or the bottom line. So super excited to see how that plays out.
The way you described that seems to echo how you described acquisition through entrepreneurship with digital transformation opportunities, like buying HVAC or something, and then and you're likening it or connecting it to the entire world, saying everything we see around us touched a pallet. And I'm also imagining like healthcare, like medicine and stuff like that. In the pandemic, I remember there was an article about some of the issues with supply chain and the chaos that ensued, and perhaps that's something you're addressing with like blockchain or something like that in terms of organization and tracking. Are you able to share at all, like some of the trends or directions that you're seeing or experimenting with?
Top secret.
Okay.
We have some interesting things we're working on, but you're absolutely right. There was a lot of overlap in my past experience with this opportunity that just like I said, fired me up. It's funny because the signals were there as well. Over the last year, there was one of my partners, that's a lawyer in SMB M&A, just posting on X that, oh, I came across an operator at a networking event, and he's in this pallet space, and it's like this best kept secret and niche. I'm like, okay, one. Then I
Mhm.
came across a podcast episode where the guest acquired a pallet company. I was like, okay, that's two. And then the third time I hear something, I'm like, okay, maybe I should really look into this space and what's going on. And thankfully, I came across the folks at Pallet Connect, and yeah, I'm super excited to lead the way there as their head of strategic growth for global. So just helping them scale, helping them grow, and introducing their product to more partners and customers around the world.
That's cool. Well, Nunzio, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Where can people follow you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm on X, Nunzio Presta, so NUNZIO PRESTA. You could always go to Rothwell Capital's website. You could also go to Pallet Connect's website. But yeah, the best way is most likely through the websites or my X profile for sure.
Great. Well, thanks once again. Really interesting conversation.
Thanks, David.